right, for today's conversation, let's set the standard. Let's set the expectations here by giving a definition of value. So I think when we were talking before the start of the recording here, we had four definitions of value. There were two nouns, two verbs. If you got those pulled up, can you read those off real quick?
Alright, the first definition, the noun, the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. The second one is a person's principles or standards of behaviors, one judgment of what is important in life. The verbs are estimate, the monetary worth of something, and the other verb is consider someone or something to be important or beneficial, to have high standards of.
All right. So we've got two nouns, two verbs. So let's say that for the sake of conversation, that when we speak of value, we're eliminating the cost of something. While I feel like that still might be relevant in the sense of, depending on who's valuing who, but we're speaking from the perspective of value as a person, because there's a lot of conversation on social media that is in the self-help world, the self-improvement world, around the words, the phrase high value, what it means to be high value. And I would say that the start of this conversation between you and I was from me being in an environment that I felt like I had nothing to offer in this space. Like, I realized after I left, the reason that I was a little bit uncomfortable was because the things that I care about, prioritize, hobbies, interests, didn't seem to align in the place that I was in. Like, I didn't feel like I had anything to contribute to conversations or the interactions. And I thought it was probably just best that I go home. And so from there, that led me to question what is value, because I started to kind of have that buzzing in my head. Like, I don't have any value in this space. And that got me thinking, is value something that is quantitative or is it qualitative? Like, do you have to get more value versus just having an awareness of what your value is? Does that make sense?
That makes plenty sense. That makes plenty sense. And I think it's probably a bit of both, depending on, the realm that you're trying to be at, the room that you want to be in, the room that you are. I think it's a bit of both. I think the value of a person kind of means, okay, well, what use of am I to this room? What can I give to this room? What do I want out of this room? So what is the value that I can give, and what is the value that I want as well? So I think that's probably the quantitative part, or the qualitative part, my bad. That's the qualitative part. And the quantitative part is, how much of that can I give? How much of that do I have? And do I want to give it? And how much of that can I get? And do I really want that value as well?
Yeah, I like that you led with what can I give, right? Because to be someone of value, I like that better. To be a person who's aware of what their value is versus high value, low value, because I think it's more realistic. Because there are, in these conversations online, when we talk about having high value, it's really determined by other people. But when we are aware of what our value is, or when we say what our value is, I like the idea of thinking where our value is. For instance, if I'm in a room full of executive CEOs that make a lot of money, like, their value is going to be more so in line with finances. But that doesn't mean that these are high value people to someone who already has money, or to someone who isn't concerned with having a lot of money. So like myself as an example, I watch a lot of anime. I primarily work in sex education, sexual health, and in those spaces, I have a lot of confidence. I have a lot to contribute. I can have conversations. But when you ask me about pop culture, if you ask me about cars, if you ask me about even sports, like I can talk sports, but I'm not like obsessed on it or with it. So in those types of conversations, I really don't have much to contribute. So what a person who is aware of their value is going into an environment, whether they know that this is a place for those parts of myself, or this might not be a place for those parts of myself. I think that you're being a person of value is more so recognizing where your value belongs, not just like where it is. I don't know if, because I'm processing this for the first time out loud, and I can't really tell if this is making sense or not.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I can't remember who said it, but they said something along the lines of, like you just said, certain places hold certain things of value more versus other places. Like, so they said basically that in times of war, a bookstore holds no value. So if we were in war right now, such and such invaded us, bookstores wouldn't be valuable, even though they could have the most valuable book in there. It'd be all first editions. That's exactly what the person said. And they said, but on the other hand, bars and alcohol salesmen would have great value in times of war because to get through war, people have to cope some way. And it could be the crappiest alcohol. It could be the lowest percent alcohol. So it's like, yes, both of those things are valuable in their own terms, but not where they are or where they will be, not in every situation or every setting. So yes, so I think us as people, we need to understand what value we bring, and like I said, also the value that we want to get out of others or places or things or whatever, and value for value, because our value isn't accepted or necessarily needed all places,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, here's a very useful thing for that helped me. So our value is on one hand, something that we decide, okay, this is what I value. In one of those definitions, what I hold to high regard, right? And so while that may hold true, it's also true that other people determine our value as well. So an exercise that I did, and I have no idea where I came up with this, but when I was 26 or 27, I took inventory on my value by asking people around me who were in my life in different ways to just give me 3 words that described me. And this was what helped me come up with my core values. And these are the things that I personally hold to a high regard. I asked a few coworkers, I asked a few friends, I asked a few ex-girlfriends, I asked a few relatives. So I had perspectives from different people to recognize how I was being seen by other people, because we may think that we're putting off one thing, but what people are picking up from us can be completely different. So I got all these words, and what consistently came up was peaceful. Peaceful was like a category for a cluster of these words. So people see me as calming, and that made me realize, oh, okay, peace is something that I'm putting out there. Another one was like growth, like that I value growth and that I want to see people do better, and that led to me creating a value of evolution. And then there was open-mindedness as the third thing that was really common that came up. Like, oh, Courtney, you're so open-minded. Like, the way you think, like the way that you can just be accepting and non-judgmental and understanding. And that led me to come up with like the value of freedom. And so these became my three core values based on what I saw. And there were also some things that I didn't like that I saw in there. Just like low confidence was one thing. So there was this sense of uncertainty with myself. So that was something that I wanted less of. So it meant me understanding my strengths from other people as well as my weaknesses from other people. And from there, I was able to decide, okay, these are my core values. This is how I'm going to, like, this is how I'm living without even recognizing it, right? So if other people are just picking up on that, it's like, okay, well, I know these things about myself, which inherently boosts confidence because it's really about awareness. I'm aware of my strengths and I'm aware of this one weakness that I have, which is this sense of uncertainty, which gave me a starting point to understanding what my value was by going through what I value personally.
That makes plenty of sense. I think that's a good exercise. I want to try that and asking people what they can describe me in a couple words and see what comes up too.
But does that not come off as like being needy or people pleasing and just like the negative behaviors that we would see people talk about? Like, no, don't ever do that. Don't determine your value based on other people, even though other people determine our value. It's a lot of contradictions in the self-help space. So to say that and that be like the thing that is a useful starting point, like I don't do it now because I know. So is eliciting that feedback something that, should not be frowned upon the way that I see it frowned upon, especially in the self-help space?
Well, and I think that's probably more so a problem that a lot of people face is like nobody wants to be needy, but we all have needs. It's like kind of like they go against each other. It's contradictory, and that's why so many people. That's why I believe so many people are unhappy because they're suppressing their needs. We're all suppressing our needs in order to not seem or become needy. But it's realistically, like I think that just answers the question of another thing that's important is compatibility. Since we all have needs, we have to find compatibility with people that want to meet our needs in however way you like perceive that, but people who we also meet their needs. So, but if you don't know your needs because you're repressing them, then you're never going to get them met unless you're never going to find the happiness that you want. So, like at the core of all humans, we're a bundle of needs and a bundle of values and a bundle of value to compatible people. And I think once everybody realizes that, like first off, you can find the relationships in your people and your room that you get and get value from and give needs to and from, if that makes sense. And I think to think any other way is to do damage to yourself and all the other people that you could be giving value to through needs.
Okay. So I want to repeat back to you what I think I heard, and you can just verify it for me. But essentially, everybody is using each other. Whether, however we attach whatever that may feel like to us, like at the core of it, that's what we're doing. I have needs, you have needs, and compatibility is essentially who can we reciprocally meet and provide meet who can we meet the needs for and who can meet our needs the most in a compatible sense is the people, the environments, the spaces that we're in. That at its core is what we are here for, essentially. I think people try to make life about something so much bigger than it really is. And part of that could be just because we're fearful of the present, because right now there are tangible things that need to be done that we are capable of accomplishing, and we are capable of doing those things, but it's a little bit more manageable to think about things in a much more complex way to where you have less control so that you don't have to take responsibility for the control that you have. So simplifying it, We're a bundle of needs, we're a bundle of values, and I would say the hardest part of this isn't getting the needs met and supporting other people and getting their needs met. The hard part is communicating that you have needs and what you're capable of meeting. And then if you want to take it a level up, like what's exponentially harder than that is identifying what your own needs are and then being able to identify whether or not you're capable of meeting somebody else's needs and then being honest with yourself about that.
Yes. Yeah, and you said something when you very first started talking. You said that we're all using each other, and I think a lot of people see that as a negative thing to use somebody, right? But realistically, we gotta kind of unlearn some things like that. Using people is bad. Like using people like for ill will or like fucked up games and shit like that. Yeah, that's bad. If you cannot reciprocate something to somebody and you know it and you are taking from them, yes, that is using somebody in the traditional sense that we know of. But to use somebody to get your needs met, that you could also meet their needs as well, that is, I think that is what actual like love and compatibility is, which is I think that's a lot of what's missing. A lot of people want to take, but a lot of people don't want to. That same amount of people don't want to give.
Yeah.
So.
And even from there, like I think that this conversation has spider legs or like that web type thing, because while we started at value, we ended up here at needs, and this is going to eventually take us into boundaries. But the fact that we're all using each other, and it's not a bad thing. It's not always bad. It's not always good. But I think that there's a huge difference between using a person in a sense of taking from them and using a person in a sense of receiving from them. Because as givers, right, you can feel a sense of what I call identity validation. I think that everybody at their core wants to have their nature nurtured. And I think that that's a really big thing for people to accept, is in moments of where we feel like euphoric or bliss and just like happy and joyful, that those are moments where we, at our core of who we are, feel validated in who we are, right? And we're getting our nature nurtured as a person, as a man, as a teacher, as however you identify. When you are accepted, when you are understood, when you are acknowledged for expressing yourself, that is identity validation. So I wanted to like drop that there to say, when a person is giving from where they feel the most abundant of giving, where they feel, like this is easy for them, then a person is able to receive. When you are giving to a receiver, it's energizing. That's where you get your identity validated. However, when you are giving to takers, that's where you feel like you're unable to recharge because you're not getting what you get from a receiver. When you're receiving from, or when you are giving to takers, it's depleting your energy. It's depleting the quantity at which you can give at a much faster rate. It's being taken advantage of. And I think that one of the earliest steps in identifying whether you're being taken from or being received is to just acknowledge how you feel after you give. I feel, for myself personally, as an example, I don't give people who ask for money on the streets, I don't give them money. I'll give you food. I was leaving Whole Foods. I had this chicken salad and some pasta. I was about to go home and mess this stuff up. And I saw this lady at the bus stop. She asked me for $1. I said, I have chicken salad. I'll give you this. And she took the chicken salad and she was grateful. I didn't feel, there was a split second I was like, damn, I wanted to eat that chicken salad. Because I hadn't had it before. It was Whole Foods chicken salad. It was like $10. But to me, like, there is an abundance of, food. Like, I mean, same thing with money, but I already set the standard for myself of I'm not giving people money. I'll give you food before I give you money. And so like that's a thing that I live by. That's in itself a boundary. So yeah, I'll give you $10 worth of food, but I'm not going to give you $1. That's my own thing. But giving to her for that split second, I was like, oh, bummer. I'm not going to eat this chicken salad. However, it was giving and it felt received. She was very grateful. The gratitude that I received from giving to her is what energized me and what validated my identity as someone who thinks that I'm a good person. That I think that this is a good thing. Like I consider myself to be someone who is a giver unconditionally.
No, I like that. I like that because you kind of set, a standard for giving how you give. Giving how you give, giving in a way that makes you feel good. Because if you're not giving in a way that makes you feel good, then you're eventually not going to want to give. Because that giving is going to turn into, like you said, taking. Like somebody's going to be taken from you, or you're going to be taken from yourself, realistically. Like if after you give, you don't feel good about it, and not to say that you shouldn't, want, something in return for giving, but obviously, like the intent has to be, not shallow or whatever, or it could be. It just it depends on what you want as a person. But, and I think that's like another thing. It goes back to the compatibility of giving, because somebody, like you said, the receiver is going to take what you gave and appreciate it and appreciate you and show you, maybe validation, but you also need to get that validation for yourself in the giving. So basically, I guess the moral of the story there is just like people talk about money. Don't give what you can't live without. Don't give it if you ain't got it.
Yeah,
type of thing.
If you ain't got it, you ain't got it.
Right. Right. If you're gonna be looking to get, if you can't live without it, I'm trying to remember what my mom told me about like giving people money before, because she told me something that was like, if you're gonna be looking for it to get it back, if you can't just give it and let it go, don't give it.
Yeah. And
because if you count on that person paying you back and they never do, then it's gonna mess you up in a certain way and have you feeling a certain way towards this person and what you gave and what you give them, and then it becomes like a negative situation that you put yourself in. Because at the end of the day, it was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the same thing with, I guess, meeting needs and giving value to people too.
Mm-hmm. And I guess while we're on the whole thing about needs, you can look online and you'll see what do men need, what do women need, and what does someone in this situation need. I've found for myself that the quickest way for me to identify what it was that I needed was to shut all that stuff out and disconnect from it, because we have an inner voice that is often drowned out by our environment, our surrounding, and the constant stream of information coming in. There were 5 days that I just wasn't on social media. And when I wasn't on the social media for these 5 days, I started to have my own thoughts that were so unfamiliar to me trickle in. And while they scared me initially, it was like, oh, wait, like I actually agree with that. And it contradicts a lot of what was constantly coming in from me externally. So when I did that, I was able to just be in silence. And in that silence, there was eventually like a gentle whisper, which is myself. It wasn't somebody I follow on social media telling me what to think or how to think, but it made me realize, wow, I need connection. And then I had to explore what that looks like. It made me realize I need I need to move my body. I need to cook my own food, right? And these are like basic little thoughts that I had, but I'm sure there's more needs, of course. Like with connection comes different types of connection. With movement of my body, it means different types of movements. Like maybe I need to just be outside, or maybe I need to do a physical activity. Maybe I need to exercise. Maybe I need to practice yoga, right? So while that whisper may come in and say, this is what's important to you. Then you can begin to explore and break those things down into what would be needs. Like, if these are thoughts that I'm having, then maybe it's worth exploring, and seeing if there's anything there where I can get that satisfaction and I can meet that need on my own. The needs that I made, even with connection, because there's a connection that you have to yourself, and me creating the space to even hear that gentle whisper of my innermost identity or whatever, that was a connection. And then the connections of community and people around me, like there are different things that I do, activities where I would love to explore and be able to connect with other people with, but I can get these needs met, by first becoming aware that they exist. So that's another exercise, and there's so much here. This is just sort of like an overview scope of just how much there is to this conversation when we just talk about value in itself, because we don't hear that. It's often get your money up, focus on yourself, but like, what does that mean? What does it mean to focus on yourself? What does it mean to get your money up to somebody who has a particular trajectory of a career path that they might have invested in for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden they're like, what's my value? Or I need to be high value. And then, without, you can run in place on a hamster wheel for forever with this stuff if you're not given the simple breakdowns of what that looks like, especially like for just everyday people. I don't want to say average people, but like that's generally who would be looking for this. You're someone who's in the general population. Perhaps you're average by social media standards, and you're wanting to no longer be average. The looking at yourself, the self-reflection piece is so important. It's such an important step in the process, because you have these examples that are probably in extremes. You see people who are there already. You don't see people going through the process themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, like you said, that whole turning off the external, getting off of social media for a little while, listening to the voice inside. I think that you also start to see when you do that a lot of things that you thought were needs were actually only wants, and they weren't even your wants. It was somebody else's wants, somebody else projected onto you, or you projected onto yourself what you thought you saw, because it all looks good from the outside, but nobody really sees the inside. So it's like, I don't know if you remember, because like you said, we've been friends for a very long time. But there was a point in time where I made the decision, for like Facebook and all that. That was all I ever had in the first place. Like, it was like 4 years. And I didn't get back on until, our friends got married, went to the wedding. I saw everybody, and I was like, all right, I haven't really kept up with people like I should have. And that's when I decided to get back on. But even now, I use it in a way that's like very sparingly, to where I try not to let outside influences like get inside of me and change my needs to wants, or my wants to needs. And I think that's very important. I think that's, like you said, like nobody sees the grind. Nobody sees the bad days. We only see what people want us to see. So I think that's very unintentionally manipulative. I think sometimes it is intentionally manipulative, especially from a company standpoint, like with the ads and things like that. And that's a whole nother conversation that we get into at the time. But yeah, I think it's turning off the outside influences and trying to understand yourself as a person, as a human, and then doing the work to get that value and to give that value that you have, because everybody has value.
Yes.
Everybody has value.
And either we see it or other people see it. I think that the most valuable people are the folks who are taken advantage of by the people who are really good at recognizing other people's value. And I would say, like, starting out at least, the better you are at recognizing other people's value, it's very likely that you have a very, very expansive sense of value, or a very important value impactful value, something. There's something there within you, yourself, that you just don't see or you can't see. And it's because you might be focused on everything around you. You're like, oh my God, so and so so successful. They're doing so well for themselves. And you really have to not only define or become aware of what your value is, but I'm jumping around because there's like 4 points that I want to make. But the one that I was originally trying to make is the people who you might see as valuable. You know, you may think to yourself, well, I'm not that valuable. I'm not as valuable as they are. You may compare yourself and look at them as higher value and yourself as lower value rather than just acknowledging like, oh, that person recognized where their value is. It's not like how valuable you are. It's like, where is your value? And then you can begin to fine tune it from there. So if this person's value in this arena, in that arena, in that arena, you know, look at where yours is. I wanna quote the person that I saw this from, but I told you about this. The video, it's a black dude. He's got dreads, like long hair, braids or dreads sometimes, and he comes up to the camera. He does his TikToks. His face is like right there. He's like, "Excuse me, I, I just," and he talked kind of like a preacher at church or something. But what he said that stuck out to me, he said, like the lion is the alpha of the jungle. In the jungle, ain't nobody messing with the lion. You take that same lion and you throw him in the water, and then a tuna becomes the alpha, right? So, and when I say water, I don't mean like 2 feet of water. Like that's don't do that. But you throw that line in the middle of the ocean, and then it's the tuna that becomes the alpha. So it's like the environment that we're in is something that impacts our value. So we have to first not only identify, you know, our value, but like look at where we are, right? And you see a person of value, where are they at? Is that your environment that your value activates or is valuable to you and other people? Ask yourself these kinds of questions because I think that for me, when I ask myself, you know, when I ask myself about my environment, and what value I have there. What I'm asking is, where am I most confident? Where do I feel most like I am capable of giving in a space where it will be received?
Yeah, received instead of taken.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and I think there's a lot of conversations that revolve around that as well too. And it's like you always hear things like, you know, don't be somewhere where you're tolerated, be somewhere where you're celebrated, stuff like that. I think it goes along the same like lines. Unfortunately, like nobody ever gets down to the deep nitty gritty of it and what exactly that means. Because yeah, that sounds good because it rhymes and all of that, but like realistically, what it means is exactly what you said: is that you are not necessarily accepted in every room, and you shouldn't want to be either. Because if this room that you accepted in or tolerated in, let's just say instead of accepted, you can go wherever you want to. This is America. But if you're in a room where you're just tolerated, if you're in a room where you're not appreciated, then what that eventually is going to do is going to be harm to yourself. Because eventually you're going to start like doubting yourself. You're going to have low self-esteem in those rooms. You're not going to be able to get the things you need out of those rooms or out of those people. So it's like that's why it's important to understand your value and who you're valuable to, where you're valuable. It's just like working a job. If you feel like you're not valued in the job, even though it might be bringing the check or the money that you want, it's not going to be fulfilling. And so a lot of people get that about work, but they don't get it in other relationships. You could not be valuable to your own family. And unfortunately, like people, you know, the blood, the stick, the water thing, that's not necessarily true. And you may have to understand that in your own value, in your own family, that you're not valued, and not that you should leave or isolate your family, but it's like a love from afar type thing. And I think at the end of the day, yeah, that's where we have to realize what we're putting our energy into, our power into, our time into, our attention into has to be value for value. Not
Who said that?
give the
We can
value.
go ahead and name drop them. The meat, money, energy, and attention time.
Yeah,
Greg.
money, energy, attention, time, Coach CDA.
Okay, all right, yeah, we gonna
Acronym meet.
yeah we're gonna give all the credit where the credit is due, no matter who it came from. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, man, you mentioned family, and I was thinking about how so much of my understanding of my family has helped me connect dots that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to connect for myself. Like I had this experience. Like I get EBT, food stamps. I moved to Portland, Oregon, a little bit over a year ago. Didn't have a job, and my goal was to run my nonprofit full time. So I eventually got a part-time job. I work maybe 10 hours a week on average. Sometimes it'll be 30, right? But it's never full time. So I let the food stamp people know how much money I was making, and the lady slipped up and told me what the amount was for the cutoff. If I make more than X dollars a month, then that's when I would stop getting EBT benefits. And I remember I thought to myself, I said, oh, cool. Now I know as long as I don't make more than this much money, then I'll keep getting food stamps. And immediately after I had that thought, I said, what the F? I was like, wait, what? Where did that come from? What sense do that make? For me to intentionally make less money so that I can make $250 a month that will only go to food. Like, what sense does that make? And it was after talking to my dad when I went back home in November. We were speaking, and he talked about like the cost of running a business because he works in the union. He didn't want to forego his pension. And he made a comment about someone charging like $9,000 for a bathroom to get installed, whereas he would charge $800 for that bathroom to get installed. And I asked him, I was like, yo, how much is your pension to where you will consistently forego, I guess, what's an average of 1,100% profit? Like, you can make that money, you can do 12 jobs a year, it sounds like, and still be able to save up for your pension. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And that was where that thought process started for me. And then he spoke about his childhood growing up with his aunts in the house. He was at his grandma's house and his aunts. And he talked about the social worker coming in and like looking around for big shoes, big jackets, big clothes to see if there were any men in the house of these single women, single mothers. And their attitudes was, well, why would I get a job when the government will give me money if I just have a kid and don't have a boyfriend in the house or a man in the house? And so it trickled back at least that far to the point where I was able to, through talking to my family, understand my own like behaviors in a way. For me to have had that thought, like I questioned it. My dad clearly didn't question it. And then before him, it was just like an immersive living in that situation for the people that he grew up around. So for me, being able to just question it after having a thought shows like strides of improvement over time. Because how else would I figure that out? Because that might have been a thought that I had that I've never been able to attach a name to or a face with or an experience to, and I could have absorbed that as my own and just let it pass. And then that would have showed up in many other ways. Like that's a career thing, that's a work thing. But if that shit would have, like, what other ways is it showing up? And look, I was
Yeah.
trying not to cuss. Here I said shit. We just gonna have to make it explicit.
Nah, we keeping it real here. I mean, and I think that's like this speaks to a lot of things because all anything that you are is because somebody else told you to be it. Or just like that's just what you saw. So we only know what we are with just our experiences. And I think even though we can say like they saw it, somewhere down the line it changed, but maybe just slightly. And then it got to you like what it maybe like the final product of okay, well this don't make no sense. Why am I actually doing this? Why am I continuing this? And I think that it still goes down to like the value and the needs. So like to say, okay, well, I need to stay under making this money so I can get this free money. It's like it's a betrayal of your value and it's a betrayal of your needs. So in order to this other value outside of the value outside of myself, I'm going to be less valuable than I can be.
Yeah, it's misplaced. It's like a misplacement of value because that
Yeah,
free money, that $250 in food stamps a month, there's an attachment there. It's like, oh my God, like, yes, this is help. I'm receiving help. This is the help that I need. Rather than me understanding that I can more so help myself if I were to become more successful. And I wanted to not say that because I think that talking about success is a different beast in itself because we have to define success for ourselves rather than me thinking to myself, oh, if I'm more successful, I won't need food stamps. Because what if you can define success in ways that don't necessarily have to be attached to money, but it's really about, okay, my my value in the sense of being able to support my needs, take care of myself, was diminished to, oh, I have my needs met as they are being met, but if I were to make too much money, then that need would no longer be met from that sense. And my identity as someone who is a receiver is threatened by being able to receive help, receive this handout, whatever. Now, if you look at Brett Favre, Brett Favre in the food stamp situation he was in, like that was completely different. For me, I think that it's constantly been perpetuated in media that black people, people who are oppressed, people in poverty, they need these things, handouts, right? Or here, you need this. This is for you, and it sort of drills this victimhood mentality into your head, even unconsciously. So for me, I think that really played a massive role into it because consuming so much social media, you begin to absorb some of that stuff and not be able to differentiate between what's yours and what's someone else's. So there could have been an unconscious part of me that was like, oh my God, I need this. I won't be able to get by without it. Versus me consciously like trying to succeed and trying to grow my nonprofit and make that business work. And there's a conflict because unconsciously I don't even know that I'm holding myself back, and consciously I'm fighting so hard to move forward that it's just stagnant, and it's like running in two different directions with at the same exact speed, same exact way, with a rope attached to you. You're not going anywhere. So to be able to become aware that that's even a thing is one of the first steps to where I can like stop and look and maybe stop running, period, so that I can turn around and see what's happening behind me. It's like, oh, I'm running in two different directions. Like, let me catch up to that part of myself and begin to dissect this. Like, why are we doing this? Why do we feel like we need this $250 a month in food stamps versus doubling down on my business and maybe even getting another job or making an attempt to get more hours so that I can make more money to where the food stamps become irrelevant. And what I found is just that there is a little bit of my identity attached to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, just when we talk about identity, it's yeah, what do we know? What are we growing up with? But at a certain point, we get to make our own identity. And it's those things that, which, to be honest, this is a whole other conversation as well too. But there are a lot of people who gain, who have an interest in gaining off us not having our identity of our own. There's a lot of people who gain from people being on food stamps or being in the lower economic state or not knowing their value. There's so many people that gain on people not knowing their value. Like, talk about monetary, like big money. But like I said, there's a whole other conversation, but it still goes into how not knowing your value, how not knowing your worth, how not knowing your needs and what you need, what you what value want to come to you, how they could just leave you lost and like you said, stuck, running two different ways, by a street. And yeah, I think that's just where it all starts. Is like recognizing that. Hopefully, everybody gets to a point where they can recognize it and can help others recognize it. And like for real, I think that's what we want to do. We want to help people recognize their own value so they can get out of the identity that they were given and get into the identity that they want and that they value and that they gain from.
Yeah, it's really going back to the using people thing. It's not necessarily selfish to use people. It's more that it's self-prioritization. And I think this philosophy that I have of self, like I use this as a word, self-ed, and it's like self-education, and any word that has self in front of it, like self-esteem, self-development, self-education, self-prioritization. You can put self in front of damn near anything, but that's really what it's about. It's self-prioritization. And prioritizing yourself does not mean that you prioritize yourself at the expense of another person. You're not prioritizing you and taking from another person. You're prioritizing yourself by being more mindful of what you're investing around you, where you're investing, how much you're investing, and that's what it's really about. It's not about what can I get from this person and taking from them. You look like you're about to say something.
Well, I was just thinking about the term of using people. Like I think an even better term is having symbiotic relationships.
Yeah.
Like animals have, right? Like the bird chews the stuff out of hippopotamus's mouth or whatever it is. I might be saying the wrong animals, but like
a more realistic one though, I think a more relatable one would probably be Spider-Man and Venom. Like if you look at Venom as Eddie Brock, the symbiote would die without a human host, but the human host would die without the symbiote once that bond has been created. And together, they have a more impactful relationship. That's when they got the superpowers, right? But it can be parasitic. And a parasite will feed on its host until the host dies, and then the parasite will die as well. So the symbiotic relationship is essentially 1 + 1 = 3. So there's me alone, you alone, and life's, meh as it is. But then coming together, it's like, whoa, this is so much better. And I think that that's really what we ought to be striving for ourselves is we become self-aware, we know what our needs are, and then where we get our needs met, because the who, I can paint a picture of this better. Yeah, I can paint this picture real quick. Relationship. So a symbiotic relationship puts the relationship in the center. So think about like a big ass bucket, right? So you got a bucket. You're a person, there's another person. You're pouring your value into this bucket, like what I know I have to give, I'm putting in here. And then for the other person, same thing. What goes into that bucket is now a combination of what two people have to give. And you can take your straw, you can drink from that bucket, and it's like, whoa, this is a magnificent flavor. Whereas if you were to only have gotten what the other person has to offer directly from them, it'll have a different taste. And if you only have what you have to offer, yeah, it's going to be good. That's what you like, but it's familiar. So to mix that, like imagine your value is strawberry syrup and that person's value is milk, right? You mix that shit up, like you can't get enough of that strawberry milk, right? But metaphorically, the strawberry is recognizing that you value peace, that you value growth, that you value open-mindedness. And then the other person's is stability, structure, organization. In that bucket, you have a relationship where two people complementing each other are pouring into that, and then we're responsible for getting what we need from that bucket. the relationship is what that bucket represents. So it's not that that person is giving directly to us. It's not that we are taking directly from them, but we've created a container of a relationship for each of us to give what we have to give, and then we receive from the relationship accordingly. And it's always there. There's never anyone like trying to run off with the fucking bucket and like, oh, and even if you do that, like now that other person doesn't have anything and you've indulged and you're eventually going to run out. So the whole thing about the symbiotic relationship is that this is ongoing and it's in the safety container of the relationship. I wanted to just like make that clear because I know that that's something that I wholeheartedly believe is that, you know, it's not that we're necessarily taking from each other. It's we're giving to this relationship because it's a commitment of continuing to do so. Like when I say relationship, I think people may default to romantic relationships, but like you and I have a relationship. You have a relationship with a stranger. You have a relationship with your neighbor, with your family, with the person that you see when you check out at the grocery store, right? So the relationship is essentially a conscious choice to to give and receive value with another person consensually. So let's let that be what the relationship is.
Right. Like basically win-win. It's a win-win. It's not a win-lose. It's not a lose-lose. Any of those other combinations, but win-win is a loss for most people eventually. Like you said, if a person, one of the people takes the bucket and run away, eventually it's both a lose-lose.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's finding the win-wins.
And even in community settings too, you know, let's say you're in a community, 12 people are pouring into that bucket, right? If, you know, one person tries to leave and take off with it, you know, like I think that it's less likely to happen. I'm stretching, I'm reaching. Let me not reach too far. But I want to use this relationship structure there to also articulate that that's how it works in communities. Except like now, you know, you've got one huge bucket, but within that community, there may be a person that you vibe with a little bit more, that you connect with. Like we play football, right? So we got the community of football. As a team, we're pouring into a main bucket, but off to the side, we may have like little styrofoam cups of relationships where, you know, we pour it into it. And that's kind of, you know, what this is. And that styrofoam cup has developed into its own bucket, right? So we can also have this in community. We can also have this relationship style of reciprocal giving to the relationship outside of that context and in as well as in community. So I wanted to make sure and just like throw that in there before we moved on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's all it comes down to. It's like I said, finding your community, finding your relationships, defining your community and defining your relationships. Consciously going into situations, knowing what you give, knowing what you have of value, understanding that value, and on the value that you want to get out of a relationship. Mm-hmm. Growing relationships that serve the values that you need, the values that you have, the values that you want. And if relationships should become unvaluable to them, or you find yourself not being able to give those values, that's where some relationships need to end, or maybe just become a little bit less. And that's okay. People need to understand that's okay. And I think if people can realize that and understand, hey, this no longer serves me, or, you know, it doesn't matter what you want, it's about what you need and what the other people in those communities or relationships need too. Mm-hmm. So it's all about being honest with yourself and trying to find the answers inside, because it ain't outside. It ain't outside. It ain't in social media. It ain't, you know, in none of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's honesty with yourself more than anybody. First yourself.
Yeah. So wrapping this up, I think that this is a really good place for us to leave people with just like an understanding of an overview. Like I'd say that this is like a pilot. You know, we didn't go too deep in anything, but you see how easy it is to, when you ask what is value, to go off into needs, using people, relationships, success, opportunities, speaking about your values, your core values, how you show up. There are so many layers to this thing. And I think throughout the course of this podcast, we're going to make it a point to, you'll be on here sometimes. I'm going to be doing a podcast myself, probably mostly, but I'd like to have you on here as much as possible, because for me, like, when we get to bouncing ideas off of each other, I find that you hit blind spots for me, and I think that I do the same thing for you. This is again an example of reciprocity. So yeah, this will be the pilot, and what I want to do is listen to this, deconstruct like the main points or words that we touched on, and then be able to talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. But the last thing is, you sent me this. I considered it to be a meditation. I forget what the guy's name is. We mentioned he looked like DJ Khaled with the clean beard. What was his name?
Oh, yeah. Coach EO.
Coach EO. All right. So he did this thing where it was just basically like, what if you were nothing? And I was thinking about this when I wanted to do an intro. It's like, all right, because I would be saying who I am, what I do, and all of that. But like, we're two people here, and we having a conversation. I want people to understand that like anybody can do this. Anybody can do what we're doing here. And a good starting point would be to ask yourself maybe that question. If nobody was around, if I didn't have to identify as anything, what labels do I have? And if I remove those labels, what am I left with? And then just surrender to the peace that is that space, that stillness, that silence of what it means to be nobody, to be nothing, to have no expectations, no attachments. You're just in that space and you're breathing. And when you can connect with that calm, I want for you to be able to do that coming into every podcast episode that you listen to, so that you can really listen to what is yours and what is you, what is yourself, and what's resonating. And when you feel it in your body that something resonates, be able to just like make space for that. Write it down, ask yourself a question, begin to touch on, whatever is most resonating for you in those moments. But yeah, I thought that was a really good exercise. It was something that I even tried, and I liked what I came up with.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think we both have the same goal. We just want to be a positive force in the world, for real. It's the goal started with us, ourselves individually, and I don't know. I've started to understand that I find great value in giving to others. Speaking of value, I find great value. I found great, like, I get a need met out of being able to give to other people, understanding, that we both can have, that everybody can have. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to continue to do with my life, any chance I get. So, and I appreciate for you having me on, and yeah, I'm looking forward to being on many, many more times.
Oh yeah. And yeah, we've been on this kick but we just been quiet about it. And like when I started speaking to other people about it, the other like men around me, they've been like, it's kind of like a little secret society club type thing of people who've been like, oh yeah, I follow this person, or I've been listening to this or talking about this for a while. I just haven't been able to find like other people who are on the same shit I'm on. And so yeah, it's the last several conversations that we've been having have been like ones worth recording, because your average everyday person can apply, what we talking about to their own lives. So this is about to stop recording in about a minute, so ain't no outro. This is just the pilot of what'll probably just be called Self. I think that's what I want to stick to that. I like Self. And yeah, that'll be it. So hope y'all tune in. If the pilot was good to you, then leave a rating, a review, subscribe. I'll have like ways of contacting me. I'm on Instagram at Courtney Brame _ CourtneyBrame_ And I'm gonna get Will to make an Instagram too, especially if he's gonna be a regular appearance on here. So all right, y'all, till next time.